Hello guys, welcome to the Passion series, and on great demand I'm starting with the disease section in the Passion. So let's get started with the lens, the most important topic. So in the lens, they are first starting with the anatomy and the physiology. Let's start with the anatomy and physiology. The lens has all the physical attributes of a biconvex lens. So you know that our human lens is biconvex. So if you go by optical properties, it has all the properties of a biconvex lens. Its circumference is called as equator. Its circumference is called as an equator, right? And what is the diameter? Now values, if you look, these are pretty standard values. So whenever you have a dilemma, whenever you people ask me, ma'am, this book says this book says this, and this book says this, then I always prefer to go with the value of the Parson. So that is pretty good values. So its diameter is 8.8 to 9.2 mm, and the anteroposterior thickness changes with the accommodation that we already know from the optics and refraction, that when the accommodation takes place, there is a contraction of the ciliary muscle, there is loosening of the zonules, and therefore there is a change in the anteroposterior diameter. Okay, now what are the radius of curvature? The ROC. So the ROC, the anterior ROC is 10 mm and the posterior ROC is 6 mm, and it is the former. Former means the anterior ROC. So the anterior ROC is shortening with the accommodation, and how much it is shortening? You know, from 10 mm it is going to 6 mm. I hope you remember this. I always tell you this in classes also, that this is a good MCQ, that which of the following changes during the accommodation. So it is the anterior ROC that is changing from 10 mm to 6 mm, while the posterior ROC remains same, that is 6 mm only. Okay. Now coming to the function of the lens. Now we know that we have got two important refractive organs in our body, that is in the eye. We have got cornea and we have got the lens. So whatever are the refractive properties which are given by the corneal surface, they are resembling that of the lens too. So the function of the lens is to transmit and the refract light. Now how much light it is refracting? So lens is transmitting 80% of the light, which is between 400 to 1400 nanometer, and is responsible for 35% of the refractive power. We all know that the total power is plus 60 diopter, and out of this plus 60 diopter we have got what you call as 43 to 45 belonging to cornea, and only 15 to 17 diopter this belongs to lens. So it is only 35% of the total power. Now coming to the metabolism. So we all know that the metabolism of the lens is mainly anaerobic metabolism. Glycolysis is responsible. So glycolysis is responsible for 85% of utilization. Then we have got the pentose phosphate shunt. This is accounting for about 15%. Now whenever we have got more and more anaerobic metabolism, what is likely to be present more? So obviously that will be your lactate. So where this lactate is going? You remember, this lactate will go into the aqueous, and this aqueous will provide the nutrition to the lens. So this lactate is indirectly again going back to the lens only. The cortex. Now if you talk about metabolically active part, so we know that it is the cortex which is the most metabolically active region. And the energy which is being released from the glucose is used for the production of the glutathione. Glutathione, I think, is a very important component, and when we do the cataract surgery, that time also the ideal irrigating solution that we are using is the basal salt solution with the glutathione. So in that respect also, glutathione is a very important component. Ion transportation, production of the larger molecules, glutathione. Now what is the function of glutathione? The function of glutathione is to maintain the proteins in the reduced state and retain the lens pump integrity. I think this is pretty important, because glutathione is given in the basal salt solution, the ideal solution. Then glutathione is a part of the antioxidative mechanism also. So by far this is important. Okay, now coming to the constituents of the lens. So lens is composed of 64% water, 35% proteins and 1% lipid. So majority is water, but after water, if you see, what is in great deal is 35% protein. So that is why we say that lens is proteinaceous in nature, right? Only 1% lipids. And then you have got carbohydrates and trace elements too. Now the protein concentration, so what you have to remember, that the protein concentration in the lens is actually the highest among the body tissues. They are not saying in the eye, they are saying in the body tissues, lens contains the highest protein. That is again important. Okay, now talking about the main type of proteins. So what are the main type of proteins? We know, do you remember the ABC that I always tell you? A for avascular, then we have B for biconvex that you have already seen, and then we have got C for crystalline. So here you have got the crystalline proteins, alpha crystalline, we have got crystallines, beta crystallines and gamma crystallines. And which were maximum, which were most common? That is your beta crystallines. And what was the percentage? 55%. And see, here you are there. Okay, if you want to remember, you can remember. See, if you are able to remember the other percentage with ease, go for it. Otherwise, don't take the load. Just remember, most common is beta 55. Okay. And we have got insoluble albuminoids also, that is just 12%. Now coming to the epithelium. Now this epithelium contains the sodium potassium ATPase and a calmodulin dependent calcium activated ATPase. These are required for the active transport. Now when we have got so many solutes present in the lens, we have got the cortex which is metabolically active. So many metabolic pathways are going to take place there. So it's pretty important there that we have got certain enzymes. So what are the two important ones? We all know sodium potassium ATPase. Then we have got this calmodulin dependent calcium activated ATPase also. There is also an active transport mechanisms for the amino acids, because why? We have got amino acids. Due to the aging, their proteins are breaking down. We know lens is mainly proteinaceous in nature. We will have amino acids, and amino acids will be actually taken up by the active transport. Okay. Then second important thing, one is that among the body tissues, lens was containing the maximum amount of proteins. Now another unique thing is that lens grows in size continuously throughout the life, and it is unique among the organs of the body. So another unique thing about the lens in our body is that it is continuing to divide, it is continuing to grow throughout the life, and that is the reason why it is actually so much sensitive to the radiations also. Okay, at birth weight is 65 milligram, by 80 years of age weight is 258. So that also shows that it is actually growing, that is why the weight is increasing. Then talking about the lens. Lens is suspended in the eye by the zonules which are inserted on the capsule. You should know this, that when the accommodation is taking place, zonules are actually acting, so where they are connecting. So these zonules are actually connecting into the capsule. Okay, it is the anterior and the equatorial lens capsule they are acting, and they are attached to the ciliary body. So basically, what is the attachment of the zonules? Attachment of the zonule is to the capsule, anterior capsule, equatorial area. If I talk about the lens, suppose this is your lens, and we have got this is your anterior lens capsule, and in this equatorial area. So these are the two areas here, and here you have got the iris, and this is your ciliary body. So zonules are actually attached to these areas. I think now it's very, very clear where the zonules are attaching. Alright, now coming to the structure, the anatomy, physiology and the biochemistry of the lens. So talking about the structure of the lens, first starting with the lens capsule. Lens is composed entirely of the epithelium surrounded by a capsule. So we know that actually, if you remember the embryology part, the lens came from the lens vesicle, and lens vesicle was containing, do you remember that? It was something like this, the lens vesicle, and this lens vesicle consists of single layer of epithelial cells, something like this. So this consists of single layer of the epithelial cells like this. So they are saying that it consists of the epithelium, and this is surrounded by the capsule also. Okay, this is thick, it is collagenous and transparent. See, lens, is the structure which has to be transparent because it is one of the refractive surfaces. The cornea is transparent, aqueous humor, the lens, the vitreous humor, then we have got the neurosensory retina, all these are transparent. And it is thickest at, so where do you expect the thickest lens capsule? So you know that it is a preequatorial area, yes. So it is thickest at the anterior preequatorial region and it is thinnest at the posterior pole. Now here you will say that you people must have written that it is actually thickest at the preequatorial area, and if you remember in the classes also I do tell you that actually Parsons says that it is the anterior preequatorial area where it is thickest, but if you go with the American Academy of Ophthalmology journal, then that says that it is the posterior preequatorial area which is thicker than the anterior. So see, if you are giving your university exams and they are following just the Parsons, then you have to go with the anterior. But if you go for your entrance examinations, then I would say that it is better to accept the standard journal which is of international level, that is your American Academy of Ophthalmology, that the posterior preequatorial, because so many diagrams are there, so many other evidences are there which shows that it is the posterior preequatorial area which is thicker than the anterior. However, the difference is not too high, just 2 microns, but yes, it is thicker. Okay. Now coming to the epithelium. Now we know that the epithelium consists of a single layer of cells. So lens epithelium is a single layer of cells which is lining the capsule, and these cells are of 2 types. Those in the central zone are not actively dividing. Cells in the preequatorial germinative zone that give rise to the lens fibers. So basically if I talk about the lens, okay, what is happening, we have got 2 kind of cells. So there were single layer of the cuboidal cells which are not actively dividing, and by the time they reach to the equator, we have got the tall columnar cells which are actually actively dividing, and these are the cells which are responsible for the active growth of the lens throughout the life, and these are also the cells which are responsible for the development of the posterior capsular opacification after the cataract surgery. Alright. Now cells are interconnected, so we have got something like tight junctions here. So these are interconnected by the gap junctions and the desmosomes and not by the tight junctions. So they are like tight junctions, but actually they are not the tight junctions, and they can allow, okay, leaking. That is why, if you remember that when we have got that hypermature cataract, Morgagnian type, so there is leaking of the cortex proteins through the capsule and they are coming out and they are blocking the trabecular meshwork. So that itself shows that we do not have you know, very tight junctions. There are gap junctions, and through these gaps it is allowing the passage of the molecules. So this is actually unlike the typical epithelial cells, because typical epithelial cells otherwise have those tight junctions. Ions and metabolites of the low molecular weight therefore can be exchanged. The lens epithelium secretes the lens capsule and regulates the transport of the metabolites, nutrients, electrolytes to the lens fibers. A very important thing is that this lens epithelium is actually responsible for secreting the lens capsule. Now we have got the lens fibers. Lens fibers are actually produced by the mitosis of the epithelial cells in the pre-equatorial zone. So in the pre-equatorial zone, whatever epithelial cells are present, they are actually responsible for formation of the lens fibers. And if you remember, that's why we do not have the posterior epithelium in the postnatal life, because I told you that these cells, the posterior epithelial cells, are used in filling or in obliterating the lens cavity, and that is why we do not have the posterior epithelial cells, right? So see, they have clearly mentioned that they will elongate and they undergo differentiation with the pycnocytosis and eventual loss of cell organelles and the nucleus, and that is why we do not have the posterior epithelium in the postnatal life. This is an important factor in the transparency of the lens. So we do have so many factors which are responsible for the transparency of the lens, because transparency of the lens is an important thing, which is important, you know, for maintaining the physiology. I think whole of the physiology of the lens depends upon its transparency, and loss of the transparency is a cataract, and that is the whole idea of reading about the lens. Okay, now as the lens fibers elongate and the new forms one, the older ones are pushed towards the depth of the lens. So the youngest fibers are the most superficially located, and another important thing, the most superficial part of the lens capsule is the oldest one. Now see what happens, the fibers which are present in the lens and the fibers which are present in the capsule, their arrangement is somewhat different. If I talk about the lens itself, okay, so we have got two kind of fibers there. One is your primary lens fibers, and another is your secondary lens fibers. Okay, primary lens fibers and the secondary lens fibers, and it is actually the primary lens fibers which are formed by the elongation of the cells of the posterior epithelium, and they are forming the early layers of the nucleus. What are the early layers? Like I have got what you called as the embryonic nucleus, I have got the fetal nucleus. So these are the oldest ones. So when they are being formed, they are pushed towards the center of the lens, and now the other which are forming are above it. These secondary lens fibers will be formed by the equatorial cells which are actively dividing. So in the lens, what we are getting in the center, I am getting the oldest cells that are present in the nucleus, and towards the outer side I am getting the youngest one, right? But if I talk about the capsule, so there you are having the opposite one. There we are having the superficial ones are the oldest. So you have to remember this, okay? Don't get confused. In the lens, the most superficial are the youngest one, and in the capsule it is other way around. Okay. Now we talk about the mass. See, I told you that lens is proteinaceous in nature, and one of the major constituents present in the lens is crystallines. So how much it is? So it is actually 90%. 90% of the mass of the lens fibers consists of the crystallines, and you already know we have got three kind of crystallines: alpha, beta and gamma. The substance of the lens has two distinct divisions, that is your cortex and the nucleus. Nucleus consists of four types. We have got the embryonic nucleus that I told you, consisting of the primary lens fibers. Clinically, it is yellow-brown in color, and this is surrounded by the fetal nucleus. So if you go with the layers, first I have the embryonic nucleus like this, then I have got the fetal nucleus, then I have got the infantile nucleus, and then I have got the adult nucleus, and then I have got the cortex. So it is something like this. So I always say it is an onion-like pattern or arrangement because it consists of concentric layers. So the innermost is embryonic, then is the fetal, then is the infantile, and then is the adult. Okay, now if you look at the appearances, it is yellowish brown in color, and when you look at the slit lamp, you get to see the different layers and the different colors. So clinically yellow brown dense central zone viewed on the slit lamp examination, that is called as the nucleus. What happens, see, when you see the nucleus, it means there is a deposition of the pigments, and that is seen with the advent of the cataract. Otherwise, you know, lens is totally transparent, you won't be able to see the different layers. So if you are able to see the nucleus, usually, you know, to start with it is grayish, and then it is light yellow, then it is golden yellow, brown, black, something like this. So usually when you start seeing, you will get something like yellow or brownish in color, and then we have got the adjacent deep cortex also. So the nucleus consists of a densely compacted lens fibers, and obviously nucleus has a higher refractive index than the cortex. And what is it? It is about 1.42. Cortex is 1.39, and this nucleus is 1.42. So it has got a refractive index which is much higher than that of the cortex. Okay. Now if you see here, this is the slit lamp photograph. If you see, we have got a slit lamp photograph, and I would like to show you and how to analyze this slit lamp photograph, because you know many times I get this query also that how will I get to know that what is the anterior side and what is the posterior side. So see, first of all, this is your slit lamp section you are seeing. Now the shadow that you see something like this, okay, this shadow that you are seeing is the cornea. Okay, we have got 6 layers of the cornea. So this will be your anterior surface of the cornea, and this will be the posterior surface of the cornea. And on the other hand, if you look at this biconvex shadow, so this biconvex shadow is the lens. So I think there should not be any problem in getting this, that whether this opacification or something you are getting on the anterior side or the posterior side. And I don't think that they will ever give you a slit lamp photograph where they are not showing you the corneal shadow. They have to give it. Okay. Now in the slightest of incidences, suppose they do not give it, then also don't get disheartened, because you know that posterior surface is more steep. Okay, so by that also you will come to know that which is anterior side, which is posterior side. But nevertheless, I think they will always give you that they will be accompanying the corneal shadow with the lens shadow, and you'll get to know. Okay. Now obviously when you start reading the picture of the lens, so outermost, so this is the outermost area, so this will be your capsule, and inside you have the cortex. So this will be your cortical area, right? This is your peripheral cortex. Then this area is your nucleus. Okay, now the thing which is just above the nucleus, that will be called as a supranuclear cortex, and the thing which is just above the nucleus, like between the supranuclear and nucleus, then that they have called as epinucleus. So that is not a problem. Okay, now if you look at the layers here, so we have got the different concentric layers. So see, if you talk about the innermost area, so this area will be your innermost area. So this is your E, that is embryonic nucleus. Then we have got above this. So above this, if you go with this area, okay, this was this area like this. So this will be your fetal nucleus. Okay, then you have got one more here. This is your infantile. And then finally you have got the largest one, something like this. This will be your adult nucleus. So you have got different layers. So very easily you can understand the slit lamp examination, and this will, you know, help you a lot in solving the clinical questions which can come related to the lens, because you know slit lamp examination is the simplest examination when it comes to ophthalmology, and it's very, very simple. Just you have to see from which area you have cornea. Now suppose, let me give you an example. Suppose they have said that there is a opacification here. Okay, then how will you approach this? So this is my anterior side, and this is my posterior side. So obviously this cataract is posterior cataract. Okay, now if you look here, this is inside the capsule. Okay, so this is subcapsular. Okay, and it is a opacification. So I can easily say that this is a posterior subcapsular cataract. Similarly, if they say that there is a cataract here, suppose. Okay, so this is again a cataract which is present posteriorly, but it is present in this cortex. So this will be posterior cortical cataract. So in this way, if you go, it will become very, very easy for you to comprehend that what kind of a cataract it is. It can be like here, if it is here, so this will be your lamellar cataract. It could be peripheral cortical, anterior cortical, posterior cortical, posterior subcapsular. So it is just simple, where the diagrams that we draw in the classes, that is just coming in the form of slit lamp examination, nothing else. Okay. Right. Now the cortex. The cortex is seen as the zones which are alternatively dark and bright on the oblique illumination. So basically when you are examining this patient of cataract on slit lamp, we are using your oblique illumination. Right. Alright. Now let us come to the function. So what is the main function of the lens? The transparency of the lens is the most important property which is helping in the functioning of the lens. So this transparency of the lens is actually maintained by the regular arrangement of the lens fibers which are devoid of the organelles. They are actually arranged in the form of lamellae. That is why we say that there is a lamellar arrangement. We have got the lamellar arrangement. The main function of the lens is to help in focusing the light on the retina, and any factor that increases the absorption or scattering of the light by lens will reduce its transparency. So anything hampering with this you know, absorption of the light, or that is leading to the scattering of the light, will obviously hamper the transparency and therefore the function of the lens. Any opacity in the lens or its capsule, whether it is developmental or acquired, is called as a cataract. So I think another thing that you should notice is that not only the opacification in the lens is called as a cataract, if it is present in the capsule also, then it is also called as cataract. Though you know that we have a anterior capsular cataract, we have a posterior capsular cataract, then we have a subcapsular cataract also, and so on, so on. But do you really realize that actually the opacification in the capsule is also a what you call as a cataract? Okay, so capsule is also a part of the lens, and if you are having some opacification in the capsule, it is very well cataract only, right? As a general rule, developmental opacities are the partial and the stationary. Matlab, usually they say that usually the opacities which are developmental, so developmental opacities will be your partial and stationary, while if you talk about the acquired opacities, they are progressing until the entire lens is involved. Though you can get the exceptions, but I think I have discussed this a lot many times that nature is always favorable. So if you have a developmental opacity present since birth, so usually they are just the partial ones, they are usually the stationary ones, but those which are coming late, acquired ones, they can actually progress. Exceptions are known that I told you. Care, however, should be taken in using this term clinically, as it often arouses anxiety, which may be entirely unjustified. Okay, this applies particularly to the stationary types of opacity. It is to be remembered that even in the senile cataract, the opacities may remain localized for years without causing the serious disability, or sometimes without being suspected. It is often, therefore, wise to tell the patients that they have got lens opacities, and if pressed to suggest the development of cataract may be long delayed and can be dealt with adequately should the need arise. Now, they are telling you how to deal with the patient. See, there are two different things, your academic knowledge and your clinical skill. Whatever you are learning, you have to give a test, but beyond that also there is a whole lot that is remaining. I think everybody will have the knowledge of the subject. When you take the PG, obviously everybody will have basic knowledge of that subject, but do you notice that some of the people do pretty well in their field, some are doing average and something like that. So this actually depends at how you are dealing with your patients. Means after all, it is your personal touch that you are giving to the patient that is very, very important. So you know, if you feel like that the amount of opacity which is present in the lens is not severe enough, which is disrupting the visual pathway of the patient, or that is not hampering the day-to-day activities, that or that is not that much that needs immediate surgery, you know, you can actually prefer not to use the word cataract in front of the patient, because you know the cataractus patients obviously will be pretty old, and you know, they are quite apprehensive about these words, and they become quite emotional when they hear that something wrong is there. So instead of using the word cataract, you can simply use that there is opacity, and like some people are, you know, bent upon to tell what is the problem, then also you can say ki just shuruaat hai and nothing to worry. and you will see yourself, okay, if you are doing clinical postings or attending some clinical posting, or maybe somebody is showing you the reports and asking you, you will see that that makes a whole lot of difference in the patient's perspective about you. He will feel more confident about you, and so your slightest of the efforts will make a entire change in the patient's perspective, so that should be done. Damage to the lens capsule, we have got damage to the proteins, fibers by the trauma, toxins, hydration or exposure to the ultraviolet radiations. So they are affecting the lens transparency. So indirectly they are telling you what are the different factors which are responsible for the cataract. So let's come to the etiopathogenesis of the cataract. Cataract is caused by the degeneration and opacification of the lens fibers. However, we can have different things responsible for this degeneration as well as opacification. The formation of aberrant lens fibers and deposition of certain materials could also be there. Loss of transparency occurs because of the abnormalities of the lens proteins. There can be disorganization of the fibers. Now, what are the reasons? What are the, clear-cut reasons for the degeneration of the lens fibers and the loss of transparency are not yet clear. Probably they are varying in different cases. Now, I think you will relate with this, that every time we read something, you people like fire faculties with why. It's very good. You should be inquisitive, but like they are also saying, everything is not yet unfolded. So some things we know, some things are still in reserve, and you people have to work on it to find out the cause. So though we know many things about the etiopathogenesis of the cataract, but still we do not know many things, and they have to be unfolded yet. Okay, so different kind of cataracts do have different kinds of etiologies. The exact mechanism is not known, though in some of the cases we do know quite some linking things which may be leading to the degeneration and disorganization of the lens fibers. Any factor, it can be physical factor or a chemical factor which is disturbing the critical intracellular or the extracellular equilibrium. So what they are saying, that anything that disturbs the critical intracellular and extracellular equilibrium of the water and electrolytes, or it is deranging the colloid system, will actually bring about the opacification. So what they are saying is that lens is an organ which contains so much amount of water, 64%. So anything that is disturbing that hydration content will obviously affect the transparency. Aberrant lens fibers are produced when the germinal epithelium of the lens loses its ability to form the normal fibers, like it is happening in the posterior subcapsular cataract. Now, some types of cataract are related with the hydration, some are due to the aberrant formation of the fibers. Then in some cases we have got the fibrous metaplasia, like in cases of the complicated cataract. Then in some cases we have got what you call as the epithelial cell necrosis, which leads to the glaucoma fleckens in the acute angle closure glaucoma. If you remember about the Vox triad that we read in the angle closure glaucoma acute congestive phase, we have got the glaucoma fleckens, which are the anterior subcapsular cataracts. So they are actually due to the epithelial cell necrosis. Then somewhere we can have the abnormal products of metabolism, like in storage diseases, or we have gone inborn errors of metabolic products like copper in cases of Wilson's diseases. It can be toxic reactions, chalcosis, it could be sidrosis. So we know that there are so many things. So obviously so many varied things are causing the cataract. All of them will not lead to the cataract by a similar mechanism, but yes, one of the few mechanisms they can be sharing. Biochemically, 3 factors. So what I was saying, that now they say that it is 3 factors which are evident in the process of the cataract. So let's find out the common things which are happening in all the cases of cataract. In the early stages of the cataract, particularly the rapidly developing. So one is your hydration. Hydration is a very, very prominent feature, so that frequently actual eye drops of the fluid gather under the capsule, forming a lacunae between the fibers and the tissue swelling. So they say that in every type of cataract, in one way or other, we were having hydration. this hydration was leading to the formation of the vacuoles between the lens fibers, and that is one of the common things. Second is your intumescence. Intumescence means swelling. So one is the hydration, due to which we have got the swelling of the lens, that is intumescence, and that is why it is becoming opaque, right? To some extent this process may be reversible, and opacities thus may clear up, as in juvenile insulin dependent diabetes, whose lens become clearer after the control of hyperglycemia. Now if you remember, we read this that only cataract which is reversible is found in the galactosemia. Now here they are talking even that the juvenile insulin dependent diabetes cataract, that is also clearing up if you are controlling the hyperglycemia, but only up to a certain extent. Mind you, after the full stages, after the maturity of the cataract, none of the cataract will be reversible. So it is only up to certain stages that it remains reversible. Hydration may be due to the osmotic changes, or it may be due to the semi-permeability of the capsule. Now after recognizing that hydration is one of the important factors which is responsible for the cataract, one of the important things which is responsible for hydration is the osmotic changes, or it could be semi-permeability. The process is dramatic in traumatic cataract when the capsule is ruptured. In the traumatic cataract, the capsule is ruptured and there the lens fibers are bulging out into the anterior chamber. So one very important factor is actually hydration. Hydration will lead to intumescence. Then coming to the second factor. The second factor is your denaturation of the lens proteins. So I'll mark here at the hydration number 1, I'll mark. So this is your number 1. So hydration, that is leading to the intumescence, and second is your dematuration of the lens proteins, because whenever we have got more hydration, we have got denaturation because the proteins are labile there. So if the proteins are denatured, especially if there is an increase in the insoluble kind of proteins, a dense opacification is formed, and this is actually irreversible. So that means if the changes are occurring due to the hydration, they are actually reversible, but the moment they reach to the denaturation, so denaturation of the proteins is a change which is irreversible. Opacities thus constituted do not clear up. Now they will not clear up. Such an alteration occurs typically in the young lens or the cortex of the adult lens. So this is again very important, okay, where the metabolism is relatively active. Now if I talk about the older patients, so in the older and inactive fibers of the nucleus, it is rarely seen. Here the usual degenerative change is taking place. So third important thing is a degeneration, that is your slow sclerosis. This is actually taking place in the nucleus. So actually it is the hydration and the denaturation of the proteins which is taking place in the cases of the cortex, while the third procedure is the nucleus sclerosis, that is taking place in the nucleus only. Clinically, when the first process is predominant, it is soft. So soft cataract is actually the cortical cataract because it is due to the hydration, while when third is taking place, so that is in the nucleus. So let's mark it with green. Sclerosis, that is actually the hard cataract. So you already know this, that we have got two kind of cataract. One is a cortical, one is the nuclear cataract, one is the hard cataract, one is a soft cataract, right? Okay, so many factors lead to these changes. The most common, let us see, the most common is age. We already know senile cataract is the most common one, and it may be of significance as the age progresses. Then because the semi-permeability of the capsule is impaired, the inactive insoluble proteins are increasing, and this is again very important. I think this is a MCQ also, that which kind of proteins are increasing during the cataract. It is the insoluble proteins, and the antioxidative mechanisms are also becoming less effective. When there is they are less effective, we have got more oxidative stress, more of free radicals, more of aging, more of cataract. Again, the normal lens contains the sulfhydryl containing reduced glutathione. This is again very important. The normal lens contains this glutathione, right, and then it also contains a vitamin C, and both of which, so they are acting as an antioxidative mechanism, both of which are decreasing with the age, and therefore we can have we will have the cataract as the age is advancing. They even say that we can also produce experimentally cataract in the conditions where you are having deficiency of amino acids, vitamin B2, or due to the toxic substances. Look at the toxic substances list. There are many substances that can produce the cataract. So we have got naphthalene, we have got lactose, galactose, selenite, thallium, etc. So they could be asked as the causes here. Then a very important thing That is your dinitrophenol. Now dinitrophenol is recently being used for the slimming, so these people also have more and more chances of the cataract. Then you have got the para-diachlorobenzene. So all these things which you are using artificially actually have increased the incidence of cataract. This is used as an insecticide, produces a lens opacity in the posterior cortex. Then we have got similar toxic products used in the aqueous, are similar to that in cyclitis. So these are the which are leading to the complicated cataract. So there are so many things. I think you take the name and that thing is causing cataract. Then you have the cyanide from the cigarette smoke. Then you have urea from the renal failure, and dehydration due to the renal failure causes the carbamylation, protein denaturation, then glycation in the diabetics. So there are so many things, again I'll say, which can cause cataract. Even the hypocalcemia may lead to the cataract, okay, due to the ionic balance. Then we have got stronger anticholinesterase group of miotics. Then you obviously know corticosteroids that I keep on reminding you, the old mnemonic, the GTCS, the topical steroids causes more of glaucoma, systemic steroids causes more of cataract, so that is pretty important. Physical factors are also responsible, osmotic influences like the diabetic cataract. Then we have got trauma, we have got radiant energy, so everything can cause cataract, yes. So let's have a look over this important table, okay, which you can bookmark. So what are the important things which can cause a cataract? So on one side we have got the risk factors, and on other side I have the on the other side I have got the pathomechanism of the loss of transparency. So let's have a quick review. Number one is your advancing age. Advancing age is causing the oxidative damage. If I talk about the sunlight, sunlight is responsible for the hydration, while if I talk about this one, the dehydration. So this dehydration is causing the denaturation of the proteins. See, the diarrheal dehydration, it is causing the opacification with the fibrous metaplasia, the vitamin deficiency, very very important, ACE deficiency, yes, the opacification of the lens epithelium. If I talk about the diabetes, okay, what is done by this diabetes? Accumulation of the pigment molecules. Look at the molecule names also. See this, we have got the 3-hydroxychirunenin and we have got the chromophores. These are leading to the yellowing. And these are the things that you must be reading in your pathology and medicine also, and here also you are reading. So this will help you in integrating the subject more. Then you have steroids. Steroids are leading to your disturbance in the osmotic balance, and even genetic. We know that cataract also runs in the families. So this is actually responsible for the failure of the iron pumps, increase in intralenticular calcium and sodium with decrease in the potassium. Alright. So this was your etiopathogenesis of the cataract, the anatomy, physiology, biochemistry of the lens, and some of the important and beautiful concepts about the etiology of cataract. So that's all for this session. See you in the next session of your Parsons series with the etiopathogenesis and the morphology of different types of cataract. Tell me in the comment section how do you like the video, and please share the video as much as you can. Thank you and happy ophthalmology.